25 years ago, I was in graduate school at the University of Maryland, and I was studying wildlife biology. I wanted to study wildlife ecology. And while I was working at the National Park Service, the Humane Society of the United States, studying white-tailed deer, I was studying the interactions of white-tailed deer on forest systems. Does you understand what that means? So that the interactions of deer on the regeneration and diversity of forest systems. So as I was thinking about my graduate work and what I was going to do research on, I thought, wow, I've got to do something that's just really pioneering. So I decided I was going to work on the interactions of white-tailed deer on seed banks in forests. You know what a seed bank is? It's the repository of seeds in the soil, and the seeds found their way over the course of many years by different means of plants living there and depositing them, animals coming along and, depositing them, and wind coming along and blowing them, all in the soil. They're waiting for the right opportunity to germinate and for the conditions to be right. And it could be that a tree falls down and now there's light in the forest and that it's right for those certain kinds of seeds to grow, or there might be a fire and the seeds might need fire for it to help to germinate, or there's lots of different reasons why seeds will wait in the soil, in the ground for 10, 20, 40, 50, 100 years before they germinate and grow. And I was going to study this. I was going to study how white-tailed deer affected these seed banks. So what I had to do was I had to go get soil samples, hundreds of soil samples, probably about 2 cups of soil for each soil sample, and I have to sift it all out so I get the seeds out, which is just a series of sieves that get down to this micro level, and you get all the organic matter out, and you collect all the seeds, and then you have to look at them and identify them, and then see if they're viable and count them, and then you get your research and all this data and all that. And that was going to be my research. Are you still awake? Okay. In the middle of all that, God, and pun intended, God was planting a different seed in my heart that was going to send me in a completely different direction. And I tell you that story for 2 reasons, because as I was reading the passage for this week about Palm Sunday and then what Jesus says after that traditional passage in Palm Sunday, I thought about this one line that Jesus gives us, and I saw the connection, and I remembered my story of when I was a graduate student, and it's this line right here when Jesus says, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains a grain of wheat, a single grain. And I thought, oh, yeah. So easy connection there is that grains are seeds, and my research was on seeds that were falling into the ground. And as I think about Jesus and what he was talking about, I made the connection. Although Jesus doesn't have really a way of giving us really direct answers or really direct information, I would love to see Jesus in front of a U.S. Senate hearing, wouldn't you? I mean, just a senator saying, all right, all I want is a yes or no answer to this question. Do you feel like the Roman government is threatening you or impressing you? Yes or no, Jesus? Well, if a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it just remains a single grain of wheat. I just wanted a yes or no answer, Jesus. And you can kind of feel the frustration. Why don't you just tell us what you're talking about? And of course, what he is talking about here is that his life is that single grain of wheat that falls into the earth and dies. And that's what we remember this week. That moment, what he's talking about him as that, his life being that single grain of wheat. And we remember that this week. And then we remember the other part, which is on Easter, where it says, when Jesus says, and if it dies, it bears much fruit. And on Easter is when we get to celebrate that fruit that Jesus produces with his life. And now that's Easter. So let's not get there too quickly. Let's just concentrate on this portion right here on Palm Sunday, where Jesus, interestingly enough, says on Palm Sunday, he says, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains a single grain of wheat. And that comes right after this traditional reading of Palm Sunday, where Jesus is riding into town on a donkey. And when I always think about that passage, I always, for some reason, I don't know why, but I always think of Clint Eastwood riding into town. Except Jesus is not on a horse, he's on a donkey. And the bad guys aren't bandits, they're Romans. And the people are lining the streets, and they are waving palms, and they are throwing their cloaks on the ground, and Jesus is riding by, and they have a dream that they will be freed from their Roman oppressors. And Jesus is riding in like Clint Eastwood, although he has to go on to say this right after all of that excitement and all of that celebration. He has to say, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains a single grain of wheat. And I can hear it now. This is right after. I can hear it now. Jesus, that doesn't sound like hero talk to me. I mean, can you imagine if Clint Eastwood rode into town? And one of my favorite movies is Pale Rider. Anybody seen Pale Rider? It's a good one. It's one of the best, right? Because Clint Eastwood plays a preacher who has a background, who's a little sketchy. But he plays a preacher, and I have an affinity. That's the only affinity I have with Clint Eastwood. But he rides into, just imagine he's riding into town. He's there to save the day. And he gets to the middle of town, and the bad guys are hiding, ready to ambush Clint Eastwood, and the townspeople are hiding themselves, but they're excited that that Clint Eastwood is here to save the day. And he gets off his horse, and he says to everybody, unless the grain of wheat falls into the ground, it remains a single grain of wheat. And you can hear everyone go, oh, we were so close. And I tell you the story about my graduate work because, my graduate days, because for two reasons. And remember, the first one was about the buried seeds. The second reason is because of buried dreams. The other connection was easy, but you see, I came to a point in my life where I had been going in this one direction of doing all this, such time-consuming work, and I really thought that this was going to be my path forward, and then something stopped me, God stopped me, and moved me in a different direction. And at that moment, I had to say goodbye to a dream that I had, and to bury it. Like a grain of wheat that falls into the ground in order to have a new dream. And it's in the same way. The people who were lining the streets when Jesus comes riding into town on his donkey, they have a dream as well. And their dream is, oh my gosh, this guy, he's the one. He is the one who is going to start a revolution that will finally get us out from under the foot of the Romans. And Jesus is riding into town like Clint Eastwood, and he has to go on and say, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground. And you can almost hear them say, oh, we were so close. And they had to give up a dream. And the dream was, they thought that Jesus had come to release them, to free them from this political situation they were in. And they had to bury that dream and to take on a new dream that Jesus was giving them, which was that this is not what he was really about. He was about this, which was about bearing fruit that gave more people life. And you might be the same way. You might have an idea of who you think Jesus might be, and maybe along the way you have to give up that idea because it's not giving you life anymore, because Jesus in reality is something different. You have to bury that idea, just like the people who were lining the streets buried their idea or their dream of who they thought Jesus was, and take on a new dream, which is much bigger, much more life-giving. Or maybe something else. Maybe it's another kind of dream. The world is littered with broken dreams. And I think all of us have had broken dreams in some way, that maybe life didn't turn out the way that you thought it would turn out. And maybe your family didn't turn out the way that you thought it would turn out. Maybe your job didn't turn out the way that you thought it would turn out. Maybe the community didn't turn out the way that you thought it would turn out, or the church, or whatever it is. We all have broken dreams. And what we can learn from this passage is not only that Jesus, his life needs to be buried in order to bear fruit, that our dreams need to be buried. The ones that aren't giving us life anymore, they need to be buried in order for us to take on a new dream. You hold on to a dream that never gives you life anymore. You hold on to that dream, it's holding you back from discovering the dream that God might have for you. There's all kinds of ways in which we hold on to broken dreams. They have zero chance of becoming a reality. And it stops you from experiencing life. I had a dream to be an NBA basketball player. I had to give that up yesterday. Because it's not a reality. I mean, just kidding. I haven't given it up yet. But seriously, there are some dreams that are like a seed, and Jesus said, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it just remains a single grain. Do you ever ask yourself the question, why do we bury people when they die? There's a lot of reasons why people are buried when they die, and there's some religious reasons. But I think one of the most practical reasons is that when we bury someone, it gives us closure and allows us some sense of finality. That allows us to move on. Maybe you've experienced that. Incidentally, Jimmy Kennedy, who was the creator of the Hokey Pokey, he died at the age of 94. And according to legend, it was a very challenging burial because they put his right arm in. You got the rest. But why do we bury people? Because it gives us a sense of closure. It gives us a sense of finality, and there's some wisdom in that practice. And I think there's wisdom in burying dreams that are broken or who have died. There's lots of deaths that happen in the world, not people, but dreams and relationships and other kinds of things that they just die, and we never have a funeral for them. It makes it hard for us to kind of have closure and to move on, to grab on to the next thing that happens, God's going to do in our lives. The point is not just about bringing closure, but about pointing you to a positive future. Because there's another part to what Jesus is saying. We concentrated on this part that there's a grain of wheat, unless it falls into the ground and dies, it remains a single grain of wheat. But here's the second part. And here's the part that we should really rejoice in. That should send us out with some hope and with some positive ways of looking at our life and the world. And it says this, and unless it dies, and if it dies, it bears much fruit. Do you see? There's a point in our lives where if we can bury that dream or that broken dream, and I can't tell you what that is or when that is, but you'll discover that there's a time where you have to do that because it's not giving you any more life, but you've been holding on to it because you're used to holding on to it, but you need to let go of it and bury it so that you can hold on to the thing that God has in mind for you. And that was not only true of Jesus' life, but it has something to do with your dreams as well. In my life, it was true. Giving up a dream to be a wildlife biologist, it took a while to bury it. It's kind of a joke in my family. In fact, I carry around this box with us everywhere we go. And inside this box is my research. And it's been to 4 places that we've moved to. And each time we make the transition, Melissa says, well, you're going to get rid of that box yet? And I have to say, no, I can't. I can't do it. But in reality, I have buried that dream. And this just is a reminder of that. But I buried it to move on, to grab on to the thing that God had in mind for me. Another dream. And incidentally, that dream has led me here. This is a planting season. And last week, we gave you an invitation to join Heaven Sent Community Garden to help to start some seedlings. And today I want to set up everyone in our church to bury a seed. And I want to set you up with something. We don't have enough today, but Lynn was kind enough to make these for me. But these are little cups to put dirt in, and we'll give you a packet of seeds. And just imagine this. Imagine if everyone in our church just took one of these, and you just took a seed, and you named that seed as maybe a couple seeds or whatever it is, and you named it as one of your broken dreams that you need to bury, and you just planted it right in there, and you took care of it, and you nurtured it, and you gave it water, and you gave it sunlight, and you gave it all the things that it needed. And then on planting days in May or June, you can come to the Heaven Sent Garden, and everybody in our church would have one of these to plant this and plant it in the garden, and we can call it the Garden of Broken Dreams. And imagine what would emerge from that would be something that would be beautiful, that would be a wonderful symbol of our church, our community, that something really good can come out of broken dreams, that can emerge in a way that gives life to people. Wouldn't that be a great symbol, a great image for our church? And some of you might think that's really corny. That's okay. Take a pot anyway. Put the stupid seed in there. Take care of the thing. If it dies, go get another one. Whatever, but bring it. Take care of it. Plant it. As like a way of saying, I'm moving on from the dreams that I have to grab onto the dreams that God has for me, has for us. And a dream that will not only give you life, but life to the world. So, may you understand what dream in your life needs to be buried. May you have the courage to do it. And may you be filled with the hope and the promise that Jesus gives to us, which is that your dreams will now bear much fruit and give you